This week on This is America and the World, our guest is Career Ambassador Thomas Pickering. Ambassador Pickering has served as U.S. Ambassador to India, Jordan, Israel, El Salvador, Nigeria, and Russia. He also served as our U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, and currently Ambassador Pickering is Vice Chair of Hills and Company. Ambassador, it is so good to be with you once again. Welcome home.
Thank you.
When you look at the world today, what do you see?
Lots of difficulty, lots of challenges, and a very difficult and I think important course for the United States to steer in trying to meet those. It's not doing as well as we all hoped, but given the crescendo of material that's landing on the head of our president and the degree to which our system seems to be frozen, particularly in approving new people to represent the president, both around the world and to formulate policy in Washington, we're doing about as well as could be expected under these very difficult circumstances. I wish it were better. I want to thank the president for speaking up in a degree of frankness and firmness that has escaped him thus far, but which will be necessary not only in meeting domestic needs, but in meeting the foreign policy needs of this country.
So with a President Biden now in office coming up on a year, you seem to be somewhat at least optimistic that we can handle these troubles?
I am guardedly optimistic, Dennis, and that's a diplomatic way of saying it could be better, which is sort of how I started out on the last question, and want you to know that I think a lot of improvement has to take place over the next coming months if we're going to do well with the president in the coming election.
As I was sitting down to prepare some notes for our conversation, and I was thinking of trouble spots. I was thinking of North Korea, Iran, Russia, of course, and China. Are those really the focal points?
Those are, but then you want to add pandemic, climate change, and the economic problems that attend those. And those are global problems, not bilateral ones. And it's that admixture that is very important to address as a whole.
Is it just a natural that the United States must play a leading role or the leading role?
Dennis, it's a great question. We are in a period where both commentators, the commentariat is in effect reducing the U.S. and its leadership strength on the basis of our current problems and the difficulties we've had in addressing them. Whereas the rest of the world holding their fingers and being skeptical about us is at the same time constantly asking, when every new problem arises, the first question that comes to their mind: what is the U.S. thinking and what will it do about these questions? And so we have a natural role here that is very, very important. And we obviously need to be in that mode. We do not have what I would call a full bench at play yet in being able to do that. And it is more than one president can undertake. It requires a significant delegation of authority. And if the president's cabinet is not meeting that delegation requirement, then he should be on the lookout for change, because he cannot do it all at his own. And I think he still seems to be wrapped up with that idea. And he needs to be able to use the system in the White House and the cabinet as a whole as a multiplying factor to build the sort of strength, the degree of independence, the commitment to innovation, and dealing with all of the new problems that require the very best the United States can bring to the table.
Let me hold on that note, if I can, Ambassador. Take a little break.
Just one further word, Dennis. We are not
Please.
punching up to our weight.
Let's pursue that on the other side. We're talking with Career Ambassador Thomas Pickering, and you should know that the ambassador not only served as our ambassador from the United States to the United Nations, but has served in so many different important posts throughout the world as ambassador to Russia, India, Israel, El Salvador, Nigeria. Jordan has played huge roles in our U.S. State Department, and we are thrilled that he is with us today. Let's take a little break. Back on the other side, This is America and the World. Underwriting for This is America and the World is made possible by the Japan-America Society of Washington, D.C., the Republic of Uzbekistan, the Sultanate of Oman, the Kingdom of Morocco, the National Association for Children of Addiction, Faces and Voices of Recovery, the Forerunner Foundation, the Rotendaro Family Trust, and the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy. Ambassador, let's follow up on that thought that you just put on the table about punching above or below one's weight.
All I can tell you is that even in this period in which we are being criticized as a declining world power, we are looked to be the innovator, leader, founder of best ideas, promoter of big change, reformer, whatever you want to call it, among all the other countries of the world. And while we have Chinese competition, and in some ways Russian competition, and we have European backing, but European doubts, and we have in the rest of the developing world a deep sense that we represent a hope for the future. I believe we can do a better job in living up to these expectations, but it means first and foremost, we need to populate the empty positions, particularly in the foreign affairs bureaucracy of this country, with the kind of people that President Biden is recommending and the kind of people that the Congress is sitting on, mainly through for perverse reasons of seeking to gain some influence on a small piece of policy, while the national interest is shredded and allowed to go to hell. But I would also add to that, we need competent people in the State Department and the Defense Department and elsewhere who are prepared to accept the necessity that the president delegate more authority to them than he has ever done before because of the huge load that has to be carried, mainly because of the desuetude of the last 4 years of the Trump administration in terms of not doing what they should have been doing and doing worse than they should have had it where they have tried. And this has left a huge burden. At the same time, the world is in a disorderly period. The pandemic, the economic decline, the failing states, the interstate and intrastate conflicts that we faced are all challenging countries, large and small, developed and undeveloped, in terms of their own survival and their ability to create to the progress and indeed the stability of the international community. And we could go through one by one in a 5-hour or 6-hour program and dissect each of these and talk about what could and should be taken on by the United States as part of its leadership role. But that is an important piece. And we need, obviously, to encourage from every angle the present administration to get with that kind of an effort and program to deal with the questions that are out there. One national security advisor, one secretary of state, one president can't deal with the whole panoply. And some of that then has to be dealt with by their very effective assistants through their supervision. And we have to find a way to do that that so far seemingly has escaped a lot of what we bring to bear to deal with these problems.
So we need ambassadors, we need people at state, we need people at defense. And the nominations have been put forth, but up until recently blocked. But now I am hoping that some forward movement is in progress. Let me ask.
We've seen a little bit of sign of that, yes. Within the last week, some 40 people were put forward and approved. But we have a long way to go.
Let us take advantage of your expertise and talk a little bit about so many. It needs a 5-hour program, but let's talk a little bit about Russia right now. And I want to just ask, and you can run with this, excuse me, population of Russia, what drives the economy, how is the government structured? Just help me understand.
Very quickly, in terms of population, Russia is gradually losing population, and there is a demographic challenge for Russia here. Many people have considered it potentially a fatal challenge. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it, but they have obviously to address that. They don't seem at this stage to be doing so. The second is obviously the government and how it is operated and run. And it's basically, in my view, an autocracy. One man decides, he decides almost everything. He tells them what that decision will be and absolutely how to carry that out. And what makes the economy run is hydrocarbons in the main, oil and gas. And as long as Russia's in a position where oil and gas prices continue to rise and exceed the cost of the money that goes into the Russian national budget, Putin will be in good circumstances.
What do you see as the internal problems in Russia?
I see a growing lack of entrancement with Mr. Putin. And we see from time to time demonstrations on the streets of people who are, in one way or another, discouraged about the fact that they don't have real electoral choices in their country, discouraged by the fact that one man seems to be running everything, discouraged by the fact that the Russians are somehow not yet fully part of the international community, and discouraged that they don't seem to be able to recover what they believed they had in the declining days of communism, which was world power status. I think that that was questionable, but they certainly exercised significant influence in international activities, political, economic, and otherwise, some of which has now gone our way. Although Mr. Putin, you have to give him credit, has improved his military posture enormously well. He has learned to operate his own approach to international problems, keeping us all guessing about what he will do, whether it's invade Ukraine or sit tight or be siphoned off to support the Kazakh government in its effort to try to bring stability back to that country.
2021 was the 30th anniversary of the breakup of the Soviet Union. President Putin says that's the worst thing that ever happened and is dedicated his life, it seems, or his presidency to restoring influence in the area. What is going on with this massing of troops on the border of Ukraine?
At best, we can say this is to seek to build or strengthen Russian influence in the region and to create for those people who may have doubts about Mr. Putin and his capacity for success inside Russia, the fact that he is still a major player, and assure that when 2024 comes along for time for his reelection, that he can gather enough people together to be able to stay in power for the next, whatever it is, 6 or 7 year period, which seems to be very high among the objectives that he would put down on a plain yellow pad for himself, if I could put it that way. And so it is that set of issues that's out there. It's interesting in some ways. Mr. Putin ought to remember the old maxim, be careful what you wish for, you may get it, in a sense that he is exerting sphere of influence kind of power and pressure around his neighborhood in ways that have seemingly at least brought him up sharp. Not much success with Belarus, even with his capacity to beat up on Mr. Lukashenko. Not much success yet in eastern Ukraine. Where does he want to go? Certainly some success in Crimea, but the conversations from outside seem to be that's increasingly limited.
Is the threat of invasion more serious than an invasion itself for him, as he sees it?
I think so. He needs to be careful about ending up as we do in these situations in what I like to call the threat trap, where you are making threats, and in the end, you face then the question of the stark choice. Do you take those threats and go to war to carry them out? Or do you back down with all of the consequences of having to do that? Threats should not be made without a clear diplomatic strategy to use them effectively to shape a solution with which you hope or think or can live, if I can put it that way, as a way to use the threats to develop something other than end up in this trap of either going to war or backing down.
Do you think he's overplaying his hand?
Not yet. He's being careful about it. I'm afraid we might be overplaying our hand, Dennis. Yeah, so I think we may be opening military action at a time and under circumstances where it would seem to be highly unwise for us to engage in a conflict with Russia that might well end up in nuclear exchanges that neither side could control. And that kind of what I would call dangerous threat needs to be somehow conditioned by a process and a way to convert it into what I would call a diplomatic workout. Now, we have begun again having direct talks with Russia, not just at the summit, but at the working level. And this is helpful. This is doing what is necessary to keep us from getting into the threat trap, but by using what we are putting on the table as a way of working toward a diplomatic outcome. But we need to be careful what we say and what we intend, not to, in fact, fall off the fine balance beam we're riding right now into the wrong side of the threat trap.
Putin has put on the table some demands that he wants Ukraine to have no possibility of being part of NATO. And secondly, that weapons, major weaponry, will not be strategically placed in countries that are adjacent to Russia, if I understand correctly. Are those reasonable demands?
No, but there are perhaps among some of the questions he's raised, things that it would be useful to talk about with the idea of converting them in a direction that would be in our interest as well as Russia's interest.
For example?
And some of those have to, for example, and you're right to ask that question, how and in what way can we stabilize European security, working with our friends and allies across the East-West divide at the Russian western border and talking to the Russians about it? How can we begin again the introduction, agreement, and negotiation of arrangements dealing with our nuclear weapons posture that can increase the stability? That might be further reductions of deliverable weapons. It might be doing away with or converting tactical weapons, if I can put it this way, to a common figure for both sides, which some have suggested. So there are a number of things here that I think make sense for us to talk about. They come out of the Geneva summit. We are picking up on those too slowly, I think, but one has obviously to pace oneself as they go ahead to deal with these issues. And it's a lot better to make progress slowly than it is totally to fail and have, in effect, a process that does more harm than good. And so we need to be very careful about that.
We're coming to the end of our time, Ambassador. I have two questions. The first question is based on your incredible dedication and service to the United States. If you had one piece of advice to give to President Biden, and he requested that advice from you, what would you say?
I would say organize yourself and your administration to find a way to address the priority problems that are out there using all of the whole of government to support you in being able to do that, and work on a system in which your strategy is to bring to bear the best we can produce, delegating where it is necessary to senior cabinet leaders and others, the actual carrying out of those steps and stages so that in effect we can punch above our weight.
Total shifting of gears.
Mm-hmm.
You have given us so much over the course of your service to the country, personally, professionally. Tell me something about life.
Life is a demanding course that gives one all kinds of opportunities to do one's best to support and serve country, fellow man, citizens, and others. And I believe in a life of public service. I've taken enormous gratification away with me in the opportunities I've had to do that. I've learned a tremendous amount, and I hope that I have given at least something useful back in response to all those gifts.
Ambassador, it is so good to see you once again. It is so wonderful to chat with you. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Dennis, again very much, and thank you for a wonderful program. You do a great deal to keep our country informed, smart, and ready.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For information about This Is America in the World, visit our website, ThisIsAmerica.net, or our YouTube channel, This Is America TV, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Underwriting for This Is America in the World is made possible by the Japan-America Society of Washington, D.C., the Republic of Uzbekistan, the Sultanate of Oman, the Kingdom of Morocco, the National Association for Children of Addiction, Faces and Voices of Recovery, the Forerunner Foundation, the Rotendaro Family Trust, and the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy.